All right. So good morning, everyone. This is meant to be a somewhat informal session, so feel free to unmute and chime in and whenever you want. So that said, the first thing I wanted to make sure we talked about is that, like, yes, you may not like Blackboard. I don't either. I'm a designer. Blackboard's ugly. Blackboard has a lot of clicks. It has terrible user interface. It's got terrible user experience. The tools are clunky. It looks old. All of these things are true, right? And so I resisted using Blackboard pretty consistently because I teach web design classes. And this is a very good example of poor web design, right? Across screens, like the whole thing is just not great. However, it is a learning management system that has a lot of features and power. And that part of it is useful, right? It has a lot of features and things that tools like Google Classroom do not have, right? So when we went to kind of remote learning and teaching online, and I was teaching synchronously online for the past year, like I knew I needed to use Blackboard, and I couldn't get away with using something like Google Classroom because it wasn't going to have the kinds of tools and things that I needed to support those synchronous classes. So the caveat is, yes, I know Blackboard sucks in many, many ways. So the goal here is really to talk about ways to kind of leverage the LMS and the fact that it's a learning management system and it does things that things like websites do not do, which is how I ran my classes before. So I had a lot of digital support materials and I had all my assignments online for students, but I just had a website that I set up for students that was interactive. It demonstrated all of the web design principles that I teach, right? And so that's where I often kind of delivered course content, and then students previously had submitted work to me on Google Drive, but I needed to kind of tie that all tighter because sending people to a million different places during remote learning, not a good idea, right? So these are all things that I plan and intend to kind of keep in place moving into the fall. Even in in-person kind of situations. So this seems silly, but the number one tip I have is actually using the assignment tool or the Google assignment tool. Either one is good. Had I been able to get the Google assignment tool up and running when I first tried it in the fall, I would have. Now I know I need to use Firefox to set those things up. So I probably will do some of that in the spring, or sorry, in this coming fall. But the key thing for me that has always been challenging about using something like Blackboard or a learning management system is that my students are making all kinds of interesting file types that like don't necessarily like work well with a learning management system. So they might be making Photoshop files, or they're making videos, or they're making websites, and I need to get all of their code files. And none of those things can be uploaded to Blackboard, like the code files, because it causes security risks and it won't let you. So you have to have workarounds, right? So I have some other places where students are doing work, but I still made assignments using the assignment tool so that it gave students deadlines and things like this, right? So when it was a website, for example, I had them submit, the only thing they submitted online was the URL to the website, right? Or a link to a shared file. Like I was using a virtual whiteboard a lot. And so sometimes they'd have whiteboard files that they created and they would just like share that URL with me, but they would submit it in Blackboard. So they were submitting everything ultimately, like the signal that they were done with something was through Blackboard. So there's some really good student benefits to setting up assignments in Blackboard, even if they're doing the work outside of Blackboard or using different software platforms to actually do the work. One is that, the assignments are distributed and collected all in one place. It can be added to the to-do list, so it can set up reminders and things. It can be added to a calendar view, which makes it kind of visible to students. And it also can be added very quickly to the My Grades, right? So that students can see all of those things. And so those are all things that happen on the student end that we don't always think about as faculty, or we don't even know what it looks like sometimes as faculty. So this is what a to-do list might look like. This is a to-do list from the preview mode from my account. So it looks like a lot of things are due, right? But it has all of the assignments that have been posted and you can easily see them. And when you click on it, it takes you right to the assignment. So students aren't getting lost. They're not having to look for things in multiple places. The calendar view is the same thing. And what's cool about turning on the calendar view for students is that if it's turned on in all their, if it's turned on in your class, they can also see and turn on the calendar view for all of their other classes at the same time and see like kind of a global perspective of all the things that are due for the week or the month or the day. And there's different ways to kind of turn on that visibility. What I didn't realize is like you have to kind of turn that on for students. So it's in your course shell. Who knew? But it's a tool that you can turn on, right? And you need to make sure it's actually activated for students to be able to see it. And this is kind of what the My Grades view looks like for students. So, you know, this again kind of shows what their activity is. They can see things that they've submitted and things that they've missed. And so I know that as a faculty member and as a designer, right, like I'm really curious about what it looks like for all users, not just the faculty perspective. So I went out of my way trying to learn what was different for students. And keep in mind that all the views that I just shared on my screen are from the web view. The app view looks different and often has less information, right? So if students can't find stuff, prompting them to look at the website version, which does work on a mobile device. It does have a mobile like website version, does give them more details and more information available. So, you know, if you're telling students like, oh, look at whatever view, and they're like, what? And then ask them, are you using the app or are you using the website? And then you can prompt them or let them know that the website has more features. It also has a lot more accessibility features, which, you know, sure, you would expect me to say or know about, and including the alternative formats and stuff, which is not available through the app. So something to keep in mind and to alert students of. What's good from a faculty side for me is the needs grading tool. Although I did not like it at the end of the semester when it told me I had like 1,000 things to grade. It was not my friend at that time, but that's because we had no breaks ever, right? So what's cool is that it's like all in one place to grade. I was before having to go to like Google Docs, and then I'd have to go to the whiteboard where students were doing activities. And then I'd have to go to the place where we were doing coding, right? So I had all these, the students were going to these places and I was having to go to all these places to collect information and look at stuff. And it was really cumbersome. So here, at least with the URL, I don't have to click everywhere. Like it's all in one place for me to quickly reference. So that was really helpful. I also found, especially during the pandemic, that students, you know, accidentally submit things incorrectly and they need to resubmit. So I just like automatically set it up so students can turn things in more than once. So they didn't have to ask, they could just do it. And then also all the graded materials end up in one place for students too, so they know where to look for feedback. So that was convenient for me as well. So that was my #1 tip, which seems obvious, but there were some things that I didn't know about it. Any questions or comments on that before I move to the next one? All right. So my second tip, something that I've done for a very long time since I started teaching, was using rubrics. However, I finally found like my mojo this year, I think, in terms of how detailed or not detailed a rubric can be to be effective and efficient. Using the rubrics in Blackboard was really helpful, again, because it was all in one place and I wasn't having to use a rubric and then transfer grades. And like I had a process before that was much more cumbersome, and this made it a lot easier for me. And I stuck with things that were a much more kind of mastery or specifications like rubrics. So I had fewer categories, and I had kind of one that was like meeting expectations, right, where I defined what the specification essentially was, and then a column for it's approaching. So this is like students are on their way to accomplishing the thing, but it's not quite where it needs to be yet, and then does not meet. And so not having to carefully differentiate between an A and a B and a C and a B, or a B- and a B for each little criteria was really helpful for me, and kind of took the cognitive load out of it. And I was able to grade things and get feedback to students much more efficiently. I would say that for technical assignments that I was grading, where I have to like go into code files, look at code, and do a lot of kind of detailed work when I'm grading, before would take me 2 or 3 times the amount of time it took from kind of setting it up with this this way. And I see a note from Casey in the chat about the to-do only happens if you use the due date feature, and that is correct. And so like groups and like scaffolded assignments, I would actually make as separate assignments, like different steps of the assignment, so that there were separate due dates and stuff that would show up. So the benefits for students for rubrics is that they'll know how they'll be assessed, right? And what the standards are up front. This is good. What I find really frustrating about Blackboard is that you can assign a rubric to an assignment very easily, but two things can happen without you realizing if you're not paying attention. One is that by default, it's not turned on and visible to students. You have to like actually actively do that. So you have to make sure that it's visible to students so that they have that benefit. Step one. Step two is that although it shows up kind of at the top of the assignment, which you can see next to the due date over here, they don't know that that's like a button they can click on and like see the rubric. So a lot of students didn't even know that assignments had rubrics, despite the fact that I like mentioned it, right? Without me explicitly saying like, this is where you find it, this is where you click on it, this is exactly how you're graded, and actually showing them where it is. So that became something that was really kind of important. And then the benefits for faculty are maybe a little more than students in some ways. This is where a lot of efficiencies were gained for me. So quick grading once the rubrics are tweaked, and mind you, that took, nearly 20 years to get right. But I'm happy with where they are right now. So that's good. And then, not having too many categories of like kind of skill level was helpful for me. Like the way that I kind of differentiate it in my mind, I just made the rubric that way, and that helped a lot. And then I also do a lot of kind of technical assignments that are about kind of practice, right? So I don't want students to be really penalized for making mistakes. I want them to learn from those mistakes. So, I'd have the approaches category so that it was like you get 75% of the points. So they would do well on these exercises, even if they weren't perfect. And they would learn a lot because they'd get like the kind of feedback that they needed. And then when they did their projects, the projects were quite good. So these, I would do these little technical assignments leading up to projects. And having these kind of categories, I think helped them really see where they were struggling. The fact that you can just click a radio button and be like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and have like points assigned to it, and then voila, grade made. Saves so much time, especially on smaller exercises. I did that also on projects or bigger assignments, but I would also explicitly write out comments and things at that point. But the rubric was detailed enough that I didn't really need to write comments on these assignments because it told them explicitly like what was a problem. And then the other thing that's really neat that I didn't discover initially is that there are kind of rubric evaluation reports that show up that show you statistical information about rubric items so that you might know things that you want to go and talk about or look at later. And that's if you're in the big gradebook view and the kind of column controls that you have access to. It's an item in that pull down menu. And it just makes a PDF that has all kinds of statistical information. Number 3, Casey has done a whole workshop on making groups and stuff, but my use is like incredibly minimal, but does save time. So there is a group feature or function inside of Blackboard. So if you're going to do collaborative work on assignments and things, and they're going to work on something collaboratively and then submit it, it works really well if you set them up as a group, because then they only have to turn in their assignment one time, and you only have to grade it one time. The grading at one time is the best part, right? So that they only have to submit work once on behalf of the team. And then you can also turn on some group communication tools if you want to use that feature. Oh yeah, John has a note about the rubric reports being useful for doing program or gen ed reports on achievement of learning objectives. Definitely does all the work for you. So then, I wasn't necessarily using the communication tools here because we were using Slack, so a separate tool for that because we were doing kind of long-term collaborative assignments. But there are abilities to do that when you're using the group feature in Blackboard, and that can be really helpful if you're not introducing any other tools in your class. And then benefits for the faculty included things like being able to review all the group work at one time. It was all in one place. Again, I had them provide links if it was kind of a multi-layered assignment and they were doing things in different places. And you can provide a single grade for the whole group or tailor grades for individuals. So when I do larger group projects and things, I tend to have something that is the group like kind of deliverable, right? And that's graded and it has its criteria. I also tend to have individual assignments that go along with some collaborative assignments too. So I do have a separate way of also grading individuals, but you can tweak individual grades for a group assignment as well. There's separate boxes that you can enter a different grade if you need to. There's also the ability to kind of randomize and create random groups. You can also create specific groups. And one of the things that works out really well for me in some of the kinds of classes that I teach is actually the ability to assign different groups different assignments. So if you're kind of using a flexible approach, or I teach stack classes, which means I have multiple levels of students in the same class, I can tailor some different assignments and actually assign it to different groups, and they can only see the assignments that are assigned to them in their groups. So if I have like 5 group assignments that are all different, but team A gets assignment A, they don't see B, C, D, and E at all. It doesn't show up at all for them, which is helpful. Also, small note, when you do like the student preview from a faculty member's point of view, right, in Blackboard, you also can't see the group assignments. You know why? Because you're not in a group. Very annoying. But just heads up, it looks like it's not there if you're like previewing and trying to test something. My number 4 tip, I didn't discover until the spring. Apparently I got like more exploratory. It's true, Casey, you could put yourself in a group or every group, but it didn't occur to me until I discovered they were missing. Just seems like we should be able to, but yeah, good tip, Casey. So number 4 is sending reminders, which is something that I didn't know about for students. And it actually was, I started doing it in the spring, and it was really helpful. And students even sent me back notes like, thanks for the reminder. And all I did was literally go into the Blackboard gradebook view, look at assignments that had a lot of missing work, click on the column controls and say, send reminder. And it sends a reminder out. It's that easy. And the reminder looks like this. So it says something to the effect of, you currently don't have a grade or submission for the following coursework. And then it inserts like the assignment name, and then what class it's in and when it was due. And then it says, please log in to review the instructions for this coursework and check the calendar for all due dates. So that's like the generic message that gets sent to students. But what's convenient is that if it's just missing, it just automatically sends to all the students that are missing the assignment, which is helpful. One weird bug I did find is that if for some reason you need to exempt a student from an assignment, it seemed to still send them a reminder. Or if you manually entered a grade, right, and didn't like use the grade tool to do it, you just kind of like use like kind of the override, put a grade in, it also would send them a reminder. So that part's annoying. So, but if you know that ahead of time, there's like workarounds to how to deal with that, right? Further reason to always use the assignment way of putting in like things in the gradebook as opposed to kind of creating your own gradebook columns for assignments. So one of the benefits to students obviously is that they just get this like reminder email, which they find helpful. It seems like it gives the impression that you care and that you're giving them another chance, right? Like they perceive it in that way, right? And for you, it's like click, click. I mean, my motivation is like, I really want to grade these, but I don't want to wait. Could you hurry up and submit it? But it's not really an impression, but like, sometimes I'm irritated when I'm clicking the button, but it doesn't come out, right? It doesn't come, the message doesn't say I'm irritated. And then the faculty benefits it's a quick way to get a reminder out. And again, it shows that you care about their success because you're reminding them and you're not just giving them a 0. And then Emily.
Yeah, I have a question. I really like the remind feature that you just covered. I didn't know that was available in Blackboard, and so it's good to hear that. I am wondering if you or if anybody else who may have used this feature previously found that so you said that it was helpful, that students seem to appreciate it. What students are you talking about? Are these first year students or are these upper class people?
I teach it like exclusively upper division classes.
Because I'm just, I teach a very large section of intro, which primarily consists of first year students and second year students as well. And what I found challenging this past academic year is that they don't check their emails. Or because they don't check their emails, they have 300 sitting in there and they're not going to really notice the remind. I did this past spring use a platform called Remind, which I suspect a lot of you have heard of or are familiar with, where I would text them, right? They had to enroll, and then I would send them, reminders throughout the week. It was a little, some of them would try to respond to me, and it's like, no way, I don't want to have a conversation with you. I just want to remind you. And then there was one really unfortunate like mistext, a message that was not intended for me. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I just don't know if first years, if anybody's found it effective. If that.
Yeah, I don't know how super effective it is in getting work in, other than I know it hit a few students who needed the extra reminder or nudge.
Yeah. And I guess if you're reaching those few who otherwise may not have, right, then it's probably worth it, especially if you're just talking about clicking a button.
Yeah. I mean, like the fact that it takes like 2 seconds of effort, right? Like a quick way to find out if it's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
I also wasn't doing it for like every single assignment. And I would also give it like almost a week before I'd send the reminder.
Oh, okay.
Like I wasn't doing it like, this was due 5 minutes ago. Like, where is this stuff? I was waiting and it was like, okay, like there's a lot that are like not here. Like I would say stuff in class, but then also send like the little extra ping.
Okay. Okay. That's helpful. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then my last tip is the column organization feature in the gradebook. So I have a lot of low stakes assignments and I have multiple categories of things in the way that like my grades are calculated. And I had this horrible habit of always forgetting to assign categories when I was making assignments. So I could check my work easily by using the column organization feature, which allows you to kind of see all of the columns at once and see what categories they are assigned to. And then you can check a bunch of boxes. So if you missed a bunch of things, you can click a bunch of boxes, check boxes, and say like this assignment, and this assignment, we're actually supposed to be in this category, and like quickly remedy the situation. Because before I was trying to manage looking at the grade book that like spanned for like a century. Like it was just like huge. And I was missing it. Like I was having trouble double checking it that way. So this was a really efficient way for me to double check my work. And just make sure that things were in the right categories and things, which seems like a silly thing. Probably many people are much more on top of things when they're creating their assignments, but for some reason I would like almost always miss that when I was creating them. So it was helpful for me. So there's no real benefits to students other than like the grade is created like the way you said it was going to be, right? Like your grade is whatever, like you did it the right way. But it is the main benefit for me as a faculty member was just making sure that I could double check my work and I was being accurate. very quickly and effectively so that I could double check my grade calculations and things. A lot of my grade calculations are somewhat complex and I have multiple categories and whatever. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't screwing that up. So that became really helpful. Yeah, Casey's like acknowledging that he's also used it quite a bit in the chat. That's really that. I only had 5 things, so those are my 5 things. But I'm wondering if other folks have things that they want to share as well.
Rebecca, I do have one question.
Yeah.
In your, to-do list and calendar view, that's all being pulled from the due date.
Yes.
How do you handle when an assignment is delivered to different groups or different students with different access windows?
Good question.
Because you can't put a due.
You switch to another platform.
Okay, because you can't put a due date in, because the due date applies to everyone and doesn't work with the exceptions or the adaptive release.
You have to notify the exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing that for accessibility and accommodation purposes, that definitely becomes a problem. If it's something more like you have different groups that are working on assignments and it's at a schedule that's different, right? The workaround for that would be to make 2 assignments that look the same, but assign them to different groups. Because I have similar issues when I have multiple levels. I might have a 300 level and a 400 level that have a pretty similar assignment, and they might have different due dates. And so I basically made 2 separate assignments with different deadlines.
How do you make that work in the gradebook?
If you assign them to groups, then they only can see the one that applies to them.
I was also thinking about calculating the grades at the end.
So yeah, it's challenging when you have a stacked class and you have all these different levels and things. So I create separate columns that have separate calculations. Like I do that and set them up at the beginning. It's very annoying.
Oh, so you don't use the weighted total, you generate a special calculated column. Okay.
Yeah, the generated ones never works with my crazy grading schemes ever. Never. It doesn't work. I require too much customization.
Because we use the groups a lot with Gen Chem Lab, where we might have 20 different sections. So we've got 20 different groups. Or this past year, each of those sections was split into 2 because you had week A, students were coming to the room and the other students were doing something online. And so we had all kinds of adaptive release on how things were getting available to students. And so I know I had some students complain it never showed up in my to-do list. Well, it can't, because you don't have the same due dates.
Yeah, I ended up with my stack classes by this spring. I actually ended up having extended learning separate out my sections to 2 separate course shells because it was getting too difficult to manage. And I wanted them to see those things and have the advantages of the deadlines and stuff. When I realized what they couldn't see and what have you, it became, although annoying, became easier for me to manage, but it was only 2, right? It's not 20 to do it separately. But I originally didn't do that because I wanted to be able to share resources and not duplicate efforts, but there was enough variability that I ended up needing to pull it out. We need fancier tools that can do the things that we want to do. Casey, that's the answer. We need to be on the design team. Any other questions, or I'm curious about other features people have discovered that might have saved them time or helped them out?
One of the things that I recently discovered, and I mentioned it in the chat window, it kind of goes along with what you were talking about with the column organization. So that's a great page. And it, like you were talking about, it helps you kind of recategorize your different assignments by category really easily. One of the things that was always so frustrating to me about Blackboard is when you're in that grade book view and it's the long, spreadsheet that goes on for a century, like you said. All of the columns, they were never organized by category, right? And so like my reading quizzes would be spread out randomly, and same with the different assignments. If you're in the column organization page, you can sort by category so that when you go back to that massive spreadsheet, all of your reading check quizzes are in the same place, all your participation, all your other grades. And that was really good for me. And I don't know if that's like an obvious thing to other people. I was very grateful. It was one of those moments where I was like, oh, well, there is something that can be done about that. So yeah.
Yeah, I use it to reorder things as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you put in assignments out of order or whatever, and it like puts them in the grade book in the order in which you like put them in.
Yeah. Which it makes more intuitive sense to put it by category, but that's not what, Blackboard is about. It's not about being intuitive.
No, not at all.
As per your first slide.
Clearly, that's like not a value that they have there.
Yeah.
Casey noted in the chat too that with groups you can kind of email selected groups and use the smart view in the grade center to only see groups, specific groups. So the 300 or 400 level, or however different sections or however you have it organized. Dan, I think you were going to chime in too.
Yeah, I didn't know about that column organization. So yes, it's not obvious, Emily. At least it wasn't to me. I have all these assignments laid out, and it was I just wrestled with it. These little tips are really, really valuable. For the rubrics. I did rubrics for discussion grading. I think that was something that John did a presentation on, and it is so helpful just to be able to tick off, the things that I was looking for from them, and it just saved me so much time. So thank you all for just these little tips are saving so much time. I think I can't work any harder. I need to find a way to be more efficient, and these are the things that really helped me a lot. I had no idea about the reminders.
Yeah.
I just said to them, I said, look, everybody, here is the calendar that I made up, and you have to just keep an eye on it. I'm not going to be able to send a reminder to you every time you miss something. You're just going to have to be self-regulated and do it yourself. I'm sorry, I can barely keep track of what I have to do at this point. And, I hate to have said that, but, just something easy, like just click that little send reminder. And that's just going to send a reminder to the people who haven't turned in the assignment yet. Correct?
Yeah. Which
the
is
people
kind
who've
of
done
nice...
everything is going to be fine.
Yeah.
But again, the email, Emily, for years with Blackboard, I wrestled with course messages because I wanted all the communication for the class to remain within the shell. But course messaging was just so clunky and everybody hated it, including me. I finally gave up and I was just using email, and I found students don't like it and I don't like it. One thing that I found really useful last semester is, as we moved over to the Google Workspace for education, I started seeing the integration between Gmail, chat, rooms. I made a room, and for each of my classes. And I said, look, I don't want to send you email. You don't want to see email. Let's just do a Google chat room and see what you all think. And it was fantastic. It was just what I think most of the students were looking for. Now, again, it's not within Blackboard, but it was just way better than course messages, that's for sure. And then the students who want to just direct message you, and I don't have to give them my cell phone number, I thought it was great. I have used Slack in the past when I did a COIL class for a couple of years, but it seemed like it was, a little bit beyond what I was looking for. And this just Google Chat with a room was about as easy as it got,
We
I'm
had
really
to
looking
test with that in
forward
the art department too, Dan, using
Say
Google
that again.
Chat. So we had a success with that in my department as well, using Google Chat in our classes. And I've also used Slack, but if you need like more features than Google Chat, but it's the same idea. It's this idea of kind of having kind of this instant communication, which is what students are used to having with each other, right? Which can help with like community building and that kind of thing, rather than kind of emails that kind of delayed or having to go inside of Blackboard, which nobody ever wants to spend more time on.
Yeah, there was one thing I wondered how much it would, they do want immediate communication, but there is a time where I don't want to be at work anymore at, midnight and beyond, so I did tell them, look, regular work hours for me are what a normal person would be doing, early evening, you can, I'm probably, not going to get back to you right away, but please just, stick to within normal, school hours. And most of them were able to do it. But again, occasionally, I know they're going to do a little bit more on like a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening seems to be a pretty, pretty good time where a lot of my students are doing their work. So they have a quick question. So I was okay with that if they sent something on like a Sunday night, but it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought I'd be getting, direct messages at all hours of the day and night. So it's pretty easy and it worked for me. I think I'm going to continue doing it, from now on.
I encourage students too, that when it's a question that like other people might actually have, to not direct message me, but rather message the whole group. And you know what? Other people might have the answer.
They did. And they answered each other's questions, which, he already said that. Do it, do it like this. I said, oh, thanks. Yep, that's correct. That's how I wanted you to try to do it.
And that would happen on the Google chat room thing you were talking about? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, looking forward to
group me too as an alternative.
A group meet, yes. I use mostly Zoom, but there was a time where we showed up for a synchronous meeting, and Zoom, it was one of the few times it was down, and I had the group room set up, so I just send them, hey, let's switch it over to a meet, and every last one of them went over to a meet seamlessly. So that was pretty cool. Little back plan B kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to the Google assignments. I think that'll make it a little easier for me because I'm doing everything in the Google tools, Does anybody know, I did notice there was another tool in there that I hadn't noticed before. It's called Google Drive File Embed.
Yeah, that just lets you directly embed a file in your course, so that you don't have to upload it. You just put a link to it.
Okay.
It allows you to see the like Google file inside of Blackboard as if it's like a Google file.
Okay.
Right. So it has the whole like Google interface. I will warn that when you start embedding things like that inside of already complex interfaces, accessibility tends to go way down. So probably not like a super advisable like option unless you also have a link to like go to the actual file itself as well. Like make sure you have some alternatives, and that's not the only way you're allowing people to see stuff. It's convenient for some folks, but not for everybody.
Okay, got it.
I think though you are accessing it through essentially a direct link to the file through Google Drive. So you are in the Google Drive interface with all the permissions and other.
If you can get to it, right? Like, so sometimes when you have embedded files, when you're using a screen reader or something, it's difficult to actually get into the file that's embedded. So like, if you can't actually get to it, like that's the problem.
That's true. Okay.
Anything else? There's some really good tips and stuff in that. I didn't catch all of them, but there's some good stuff in the chat as well.
Is this a safe space to ask a Padlet question? I don't want to keep anybody who may not. I was going to text you later.
Yeah, we can, if we're done with Blackboard, I can stop the Blackboard recording and then we can just chit chat. All right, I'll do that. Stop the recording.
Just really quick.